Leon Kennedy. You are?
Clear. Clear Redfield. Don't shoot!
Get down! Sherry, you come with me now, or say goodbye to Claire. I'm not just gonna leave you. Not like this.
You don't understand.
We never meant for this to happen.
This is my life's work. I'm not handing over anything.
Resident Evil 2 for a long time was seen as one of the best Resident Evil games, at least of the classic Resident Evil games from the PlayStation. The introduction of new protagonist Leon Kennedy, the sister of the Resident Evil 1 protagonist Chris Redfield, Claire, as well as gameplay as side characters in Ada and Sherry. It really kicked on from the first game, adding animated cutscenes, giving everyone the scariest fright right off the bat when we walk down the first hallway and see the licker right above us. Add the excellent pacing, gameplay, and different routes that can be played post-game completion, giving the game replayability and a completely new way to play the game from the perspective of the other character, which I loved, though I was too afraid to play it way back when with Mr. X chasing you. And I promise, he was scarier back then, like for real.
X gon' give it to you.
Then we got the first of the remakes of the classic games in Resident Evil 2 Remake in 2019, which was just phenomenal. Game of the year for a lot of people, including myself. It was the personification of a perfect game remake. So many games, and Resident Evil 3, funny enough included in this, do not get the justice the original games deserved in a remake, but Resident Evil 2 absolutely did. The new gameplay and visuals inside the new Resident Evil engine aside, the remake allowed for the expansion and exploration of the pre-existing story with the retrospective knowledge of the games that came after it. Today we're going to continue our deep dive into the Resident Evil lore through the mainline games. Last time we talked about the Resident Evil 1 remake, the characters that helped shape the situation the protagonists found themselves in. For Resident Evil 2 in this video we will discuss William Birkin and his family in depth, Ada Wong and how she arrived and her background, Brian Irons, police station, and of course the Nest lab that connects it, as well as our protagonists and the creatures they have to take on in this game. The outbreak of the T-virus that had began in the Arklay Mountains as a result of the Queen Leech's revenge against Umbrella was only the start of what would eventually become known as the Racoon City incident. However, Umbrella was already testing the limits of the toxic dumping of chemicals into the nearby river. In conjunction with these factors was Umbrella's Nest Lab's disposal of failed test subjects. These eventually led to mutated virus strains that infected the staff working there, who would inevitably escape. But what really sped up the infection of the city was a mission from the Umbrella Security Service Task Force, who was sent on a mission to capture William Birkin and his research on the virus. Despite Jay Martinez, codenamed Ghost, seemingly disposing of Birkin, as we know he managed to inject himself with the G-virus and went back to hunt them down. The briefcase holding the rest of the virus samples would be found by sewer rats, this of course starting a chain reaction that would soon be the downfall of Racoon City. With the government intervening to avoid any further potential outbreaks spreading outside the city, the army was sent in to set up roadblocks and stop entry or exit to the city. The people were trapped with the monsters Umbrella had created, and with Chief Irons doing everything in his corrupt power to keep Umbrella's name out of the headlines, it wouldn't be long before things just kinda got out of hand. To give a bit of background to the police station in which Resident Evil 2 is predominantly set, we have to discuss one of the most deranged and twisted characters that the Resident Evil franchise has given us, Police Chief Brian Irons. We are all well aware of the obvious corruption that takes place during the game. Irons takes regular bribes from Umbrella to keep on investigations from taking place on them. This is how Ben Bertolucci ended up in the cell in the RPD for pushing Annette Birkin too hard in an interview. But corruption only scratches the surface of the depths this man goes to satisfy his will. A suspected serial killer during his time in the RPD, Irons had aggressive tendencies towards women, which we see at the fore in his capture and killing of the mayor's daughter Catherine Warren. Despite a psychological examination over some violent incidents involving women, Irons' stellar academic record put him on the road to become police chief of Racoon City. This wouldn't satiate the deranged maniac, and there were many instances across his time before his death in the police station that he was reportedly involved in. From his secretary in June 1998 who had uncovered information on bribes, to a sewer facility manager that was almost shot point blank by Irons, as well as a reported 8 blonde-haired single women who had been taken off the street, never to be seen again. Not long after being made chief, he made a strategic alignment with Umbrella, as well as purchasing an old art museum that would later become the Racoon police station. His bribes from Annette Birkin and Umbrella helped to fund his passion for art, as we see throughout the police station. He's placed numerous pieces around the building. He would also be put in charge of the Racoon City orphanage, which again was a cover-up for Umbrella's test on child subjects for their experiments. His taste for taxidermy went from animals to humans. Such is the state of his psyche, which only deteriorated once he learned of the T-virus in the city's water supply. Believing himself to be infected and near death, he acted wildly, giving out confusing orders which would subsequently weaken the effectiveness of the police force in the crisis of dealing with the zombies. Not only that, but also kidnapping Catherine Warren to add to his collection, shall we say. He proves to be quite the complication as our protagonists choose to escape the carnage by heading to the police station. Little did they know at the time that it would be more like out of the frying pan and into the fire. Our two well-known protagonists for Resident Evil 2 are both central series characters and fan favourites, Leon going on from Resident Evil 2 to be the main character in Resident Evil 4 and a central character of Resident Evil 6. Whilst Claire had her moment in Code Veronica, which I'm really hoping gets the remake treatment. There's so much to that game, it would be so good. Anyway, Leon, throughout his entire character arc of the series, has been trauma, and in fairness, like most of them. But his family were killed when he was very young and he was orphaned off. He only survived due to a police officer rescuing him. This inspiring him to a career in law enforcement and him eventually getting the Racoon City police officer job that sees him debut in Resident Evil 2. The Resident Evil 2 remake allowed to connect better with a younger, more naive Leon. The original PlayStation game could only go so far in terms of character depth. Most of us know, and I think of Leon as the intelligent, broody guy who is all action and mature from Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6. But in Resident Evil 2, Leon is fresh-faced and naive. He doubts himself, and this is all new to him, and you can see he has an internal struggle with knowing if he is good enough to help the people, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to help people. His personality really shines in his interactions with Ada, who he is naturally wary, but awestruck in how she handles herself, even though his first thought is protecting her. Even after he finds out that she was lying to him, he still tries to save her because that's just who he is. He saved her because it was the right thing to do. He has a strong moral compass, and it sees him through the most insane of first days at a new job. I also liked him and Claire's initial sort of flirty interactions at the gate. It certainly made them feel a bit more human compared to the original.
But how are you doing?
You know, just surviving.
That's good.
Leon!
It's good to see you're still among the living.
He also, through Kendo and Marvin, got to see firsthand just what this virus does to good people. A man who chose to protect people and made sure others do the right thing and save themselves, and a father who just wanted to help his daughter. These are the moments that Leon carries with him, and why we see that maturity and stoicism from him in Resident Evil 4. He loses that naivety that we see in Resident Evil 2. Claire also lost both her parents when she was young, only having Chris, her brother, left as family. And while she was only a young university student at the time of the Racoon City incident, it is worth noting that skills with weapons that we see throughout the game does have some logical justification behind it. She would regularly visit Chris and his good friend Barry Burton in Racoon City, where she would do various types of firearms and hand-to-hand combat training. This explains how adept she is at surviving and getting out of close quarters situations. She is an incredibly caring person, but does not take crap from people if they intend to mess with her. Her caring side is naturally seen in her determination to get Sherry to a safe place despite being chased by William Birkin and Mr. X, as well as telling Annette how bad a mum she is for not doing more for her daughter. Claire has to contend with the psychotic Chief Irons in Resident Evil 2, and always remains steadfast in her commitment to protecting those she cares about. This has been a staple of her character and personality throughout her appearances in the Resident Evil franchise, even though in subsequent appearances she has had to watch her companion die right in front of her. Now, she isn't the first protagonist in the franchise to have to deal with this, and she certainly won't be the last. And whilst we haven't seen Claire in any mainline games since Code Veronica, we have seen her in the numerous CGI films that come out on Netflix. She manages to maintain her upbeat attitude and determination to help destroy BOW groups as a member of the human rights organisation TerraSafe. You see how characters such as Leon and Chris change from their earlier appearances in Resident Evil 1 and 2 to how you see them in Resident Evil 6, for example. The trauma and choices they have had to make in trying to improve their world has taken a heavy toll on them, and they are much darker versions of themselves. Whereas for Claire, I think she retains that upbeat personality and mentality that she has in Resident Evil 2, and I think that's a great credit to her as a character, albeit we haven't seen her that much in the newer games. Fingers crossed that we do. Before we move on to the Birkin family, we have to talk, if only very briefly, about some of the creatures that Claire and Leon face off against in the police station and lab, as they're kind of freaky. We've talked about the zombies before, and there's nothing new there except the Ivy zombies, or Plant 43 zombies. Umbrella experimenting on plants is nothing new, as we saw with Plant 42 in the residence of Resident Evil 1. In the Nest laboratory under Racoon City, there was another of these experiments, Plant 43. After the outbreak in the lab, and due to Plant 43's lack of maintenance, with staff having gone missing or dead for various reasons, it became aggressive, killing and also implanting its seedlings into those who crossed its path, turning them into Ivy zombies. The most notorious of T-virus creatures that Resident Evil 2 introduces us to, whether back to the PlayStation or playing the remake as your first ever Resident Evil game, is the aptly named Licker.
What's up?
Now, funny side story, one of the first video essays I ever did on this YouTube channel was about the Lickers, as I was always kind of curious as to how Lickers came to be, because I thought it was like an animal or something else. But anyway, the video was so bad and not well received that I deleted it, and I'm kind of glad it's gone forever. But in short, very similar to the Crimson Heads from Resident Evil 1, Lickers are the result of a mutant strain, kind of like the V-Act process that gives normal zombies a Crimson Head regeneration, only this transformation gives them an extra long tongue, very large claws, and they can walk on all fours across all walls and ceilings. They also become blind through the transformation, but gain incredible hearing. The G-monsters I'll come onto when talking about Birkin, however in the original Resident Evil 2, there was a giant moth that was the result of more experimentation. One creature that was not an original test subject but became infected due to the outbreak was the alligator that was apparently originally flushed down the toilet to live in the sewers. Yep, that's apparently what it what it says. But we cannot go through a Resident Evil 2 discussion without talking about Mr. X himself, T00, the first of the T103 Tyrant series, an infiltration tyrant whose mission was to retrieve the pendant that Sherry Birkin was wearing around her neck, which contained a G-Virus sample, and kill any police station survivors. Now, like all tyrants, they are ruthless killing machines, extremely strong if not the quickest, with this line in particular having a power limiter attached to it. Now we see in the fight with Leon that after the lab and the debris collapses on Mr. X, that looked to be his end, only for him to show up on the elevator looking completely different. It is incredibly bulkier, its claw arm, a staple of tyrants, has grown, and it has gone into a fully aggressive destructive mode. Whilst it was destroyed with a rocket launcher like most tyrants in the series, this particular one was a fan favourite of the series, and as well as being great meme fuel, it has certainly left its mark on the rest of the series, in my opinion. It's fair to say that this is not your average happy-go-lucky family. William was a child prodigy and was hired by Umbrella and undertook the executive training program under Dr. James Marcus. Becoming close friends with Albert Wesker, the two were given senior roles in Umbrella's Arclay laboratory, working on various programs and subjects, including Lisa Trevor, who he implanted the Nemesis Alpha parasite, which led to her gaining tentacles, as well as being the man responsible for the creation of the Hunter series. Now, during his time at the Arclay lab, he met and later married Annette, and they subsequently had a child, Sherry, who was born sometime in 1986. Now, as we know from Resident Evil 0, Birkin stole Dr. Marcus's T-Virus research to continue his progression in Umbrella and rise up the ranks. Though it was his breakthrough working on Lisa Trevor and the Nemesis Alpha parasite that would lead him to his work on the G-Virus, or Golgotha. The nest was then constructed for William Birkin's research into G, with him as chief researcher. His wife Annette would also be working on it with a number of other scientists, and both parents, extremely busy and work-focused, often neglected their daughter Sherry. And on the 29th of September, Sherry would escape the madness of the outbreak in the city and go looking for her parents in the police station and lab when they hadn't returned home. It would also prove to be the last night that the family were together. Wesker, as we know, betrayed Umbrella and faked his death. Birkin, who wanted to continue his research, decided to betray Umbrella from within, as well as flooding the P12A waste facility and sabotaging other areas, further spreading the T-Virus around, reaching the water treatment plant which we see back in Resident Evil 0. He would also intend to sell the G-Virus to the US military behind Umbrella's back. But unfortunately for him, Umbrella has moles within the military who caught wind of this betrayal. So when the military went to the nest to collect his samples as planned, Umbrella got there first with the dispatch of their security service Alpha team led by Hunk. After infecting himself with the last remaining G-Virus sample, thinking he would become a G-Human, instead his body rejected it and he became a G-Mutant. In that moment, his vengeance was at the forefront of his deteriorating mind, and he went on a rampage, killing those USS agents. Then basic instincts took over, the need to feed and reproduce, implanting G embryos into anyone he came across. But G-Mutant Birkin wanted Sherry. As a blood relative, she would prove a perfect vessel for the growth of its parasitic larvae. And as we see, the vaccine saved her. However, her genome was not corrected, and Sherry later became a G-Human and gained incredible regenerative abilities when she later returned to the franchise in Resident Evil 6. Now, for a character as popular and iconic as the woman in red, Ada Wong, very little is actually known about her and her background. We all know she is a spy working for various clients over the years, from Derek Simmons and the family to Albert Wesker himself. However, Ada has never been one for loyalty and always has some secret agenda of her own for getting involved. When working for a rival bioweapons developer company known only as The Organization in the 1990s, she was tasked with getting data on the BOWs Umbrella was working on. She did this through getting close to the chief researcher at the Arclay lab, John Clemens. This was after Birkin had left for the Nest, hence why the login info on the lab system in Resident Evil 1 was John Wong. It showed how fooled he was by her fake charms, and after the mansion incident, she was then tasked with retrieving the G-virus Birkin was working on in the Nest. This mission was coordinated along with Albert Wesker, who was wasting no time in twisting the knife into Umbrella by working with rival organisations and trying to steal their research. As we know, Ada would enter the police station looking for the entrance to the lab and find Leon and an unfortunately dead Ben Bertolucci, who she had heard had more information on the lab and the G-virus. And whilst Ada would fail in her mission to recover the G-virus due to her confrontation with Leon, she at least showed that despite her tough exterior, she does have a heart as well as a soft spot for him by choosing not to shoot him. Ada and Annette Birkin also had quite a disdain for each other, seemingly knowing each other from previous encounters. In one ending, Annette tries to finish her off herself, as we know, despite her falling from what seems like an unsurvivable height, as we see in the Umbrella Chronicles cutscene. Ada is obviously hurt, but she escaped the nest and made her way to the surface to meet her liaison, as during the ensuing fights with Birkin she managed to obtain a piece of his mutated skin.
I survived the fate of Raccoon City thanks to Wesker's warning. Of course, I knew the only reason my life was spared was because I had the G-virus tissue fragment. But I would settle things in time. We were both used to being backstabbed and manipulated. I had a feeling our partnership would last a little while longer.
This game, like most Resident Evil games, comes to a dramatic conclusion, with Claire obtaining the devil vaccine so she could save Sherry from becoming a G-mutant, and Leon fighting off a delimited Mr. X tyrant after watching Ada fall into the darkness. Claire would fight off Birkin after further mutation before Leon meets up with Claire and Sherry in the nick of time on the underground train to fight off Birkin one final time, as its fully formed mutated G would try to reach Sherry and implant its embryo. Resident Evil 2 is a masterpiece of a game and has set the benchmark for remakes in the gaming industry. If a game is going to be remade, do it like this. This is a template. Improved graphics and visuals aside, it is just a brilliant retelling of an already amazing game. It is built on and expanded an already brilliant story and cast of characters. The gameplay is incredibly fun and it has so much replayability. So look forward to the next one, where we break down the next Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 3. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.